Hi everyone, welcome to this heart-to-heart, honest conversations about the writing process. I haven't been here for a while, and it's not really a funny story, but it cannot be a coincidence because the last two sessions or conversations I scheduled were going to be about adversity. One was going to be about how do you deal as a writer with life throwing you curveballs. You know, you have like a publishing schedule, you have your dreams, you have your desires, you've got it all mapped out, and then life, gets you in a way that you have to sort of reframe everything. So I was going to talk about that with somebody, and then that somebody got hit with a curveball like you have no idea. So we're going to reschedule that talk. And my other talk about adversity was about chronic illness. So how do you deal with chronic illness as an author? And right before we were going to record, the author in question was hit by the actual chronic illness, so we couldn't do it as well. And then in January, Laura and I were going to have a talk about procrastination. And I think this is the third or fourth, what is it? It's the fourth time that we rescheduled.
Yeah.
So that's the funny bit for me, that we were going to have this talk about procrastination early in January. Now it's early February, but we are here. So we did it. We got here. We procrastinated a little bit, but that's also life getting in the way as well for us both. So how do you deal with the flexibility? Like, you have to be flexible. So I will have that talk about life throwing you curveballs another time. So I really want to talk then. Like, how do you deal with that? Like, you have a goal. We're all so focused, and then life gets in the way. What do you do? But that's not what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about procrastination with Laura Fyfe, and she told me to introduce her as a writer and a master procrastinator, which is great, because what we learn from somebody who calls herself a master procrastinator. So Laura, please introduce yourself before a little bit before we go into the topic of procrastination, which I'm sure is something that most of the viewers struggle with.
Well, thanks, Marielle, for having me here. I am a writer. I also teach. I'm a mother, as well as a self-publisher too. So balancing all of those can offer so many opportunities for procrastination. One becomes procrastination for another, and it's all about spinning all those plates. And how do you spin all these plates at the same time without one of them dropping? I call myself a master procrastinator. I went down to part-time at work to do more writing, and I ended up doing more teaching. I started up a business to procrastinate about my writing, and I started up creative writing classes to help other beginner writers set up a regular process. So it's that usual thing of teachers do as I say, not as I do. So I was helping other people with their procrastination, but that was giving me loads of things that I could do and learn about in terms of business and marketing, and taking creative writing classes for adults rather than children. I learned a lot, but to be fair, it was procrastination from writing, and that was 10 years ago, nearly. I've written blogs about procrastination. I've written books and published them about procrastination. This is Wellspring. That's my main little book about procrastination. And there's so many exciting things out there you can do, and all of them I've used to procrastinate from my own writing, which I think gives me lots of opportunities to give other people advice about it, because I can spot it so quickly in somebody, and it's like a little warning bell, ding ding ding, and I can say exactly why and how they're procrastinating, and it helps me to help other people.
So to dive right in, because I think for a lot of people, when they think of procrastination, they think of binging Netflix, spending too much time on Facebook or Instagram or Pinterest, whatever gets you going. But what you're basically saying, and of course I feel entirely called out like immediately by this, is that you can be working your ass off but still be procrastinating.
Definitely. I would completely agree with that. There's productive procrastination, I have a lot of friends who say, you know, I get loads done, and as soon as I get an idea, I go for it. And they say, but you do so much. And I think, but actually what I really want to be doing, what I feel I should be doing, is my writing. And a lot of the other things that I do are procrastination for that. And what I think a master procrastinator does is we all use, say, for example, tidying up the house to procrastinate for going to the gym, or we use going to the gym for procrastination for this, that, or the other. So you can be very productive with your procrastination. And, you know, I've written my 2 writing guides because to me those were comfort zone. That was taking knowledge that I already had and putting that into a non-fiction format, which is what I felt quite confident with. And what I really, really deep down want to do is write novels. I have about 5 different novels on the go that I've started and I haven't finished. So that's productive, but again, finishing things off is quite a scary thing. And really what I talk about in Wellspring is that at the bottom of procrastination, all procrastination, is fear.
Well, that's definitely something I want to go into today. But first, like, what do you think? Because I think, like I said, like I think a lot of people think when you procrastinate, like you're not building your business, your writing business in this case. So if you make money with what you are procrastinating with, do you think it's easy to get caught up in that? Like, but this is making money, so this is a good thing, right? So this is something I should be doing. While in fact, of course, what you really, really, really want to do is like somewhere beneath the surface, you're not really attending to that.
Yeah, I totally agree. You can have the short-term payoffs, I suppose, and it's the value that you find in that personally as well, the success that you find with it. I love taking creative writing. I really enjoy helping, seeing that light bulb go off for people and knowing that you've helped somebody. So I really love taking creative writing workshops for that reason, because the payoff is immediate. You know, those instant gratification monkeys. So you have that instant payoff there in terms of the value and knowing you're helping people. Same thing when you're helping someone, coaching someone one-to-one.
Yeah.
Or when you put something on Facebook and you get that instant, you know, the likes, and you get people commenting on it saying that that's, or the emails that I send out on a weekly basis, and people email back saying that's really helped them. So you have the instant payoff there, but the long term, I think that's why novel writing is so difficult for so many people, because it's a long-term thing. And if you're a sprinter by nature, I talk about whether people are drippers or chunkers. And drippers are people who are very good at doing a little bit at a time, all the time. And chunkers are people who are more sprinters and do a whole chunk of something all at once, and then that goes off to the side, which definitely has its advantages. But it means that the plate spinning and the constant getting into good habits can fall by the wayside as well.
Because when they have this big thing that they want to focus on, everything else sort of falls away.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what happens. And for things like, if you're going to be a self-published writer, the people who I found looking at the 20 books to 50k conference and meeting people there and looking at the 20 books to 50k Facebook page, the people that are most successful are the people who are able to set it up as a regular habit, and they write every single day, and they market themselves every day, and they touch in with it regularly. And I think that's where you can be most productive. And that's where I think we've talked before about novel writing as being this big, huge, overwhelming task. And if you get a regular habit in there, and that's what I talk about in Wellspring and in my other book, Magpie Mind, which is about more sort of spontaneous creativity. If you can get into a regular habit, then that puts a certain amount of fear off to the side, because it's just part of your daily life.
So instead of, and this is like my previous partner at ADHD. So I know that kind of mindset, that what troubles people with ADD or ADHD is they want to do something, but they only see the big thing. And it's very difficult for them to sort of like, you know, tear it apart and say, okay, so what are the little steps? And can I just do one step at a time? Because it's That's why they don't get things done. And I don't think it's necessarily only ADD or ADHD mindset. I think a lot of people have that. And the same with the novel. It's like, so that's why I felt so called out, because I've recently, this year, I started revising the 5th draft of my YA fantasy novel, which is
Yeah.
something I hadn't touched in 18 months.
Wow.
I had to actually, because I sent it out to beta readers July 2018.
Sure.
And I didn't email any of them back. I got completely caught up in other things, including a divorce. So, that takes quite a bit of energy. And a move, like I moved to Cyprus. And I kept telling myself, like, I published 8 or 9 books over the past 12 months.
That's amazing.
So I'm good, right? So I love creating those, but it's all nonfiction.
Mm-hmm.
It's not novel writing. So yeah, somebody else called me out and they're like, why are you not writing your fantasy anymore? It's like, oh yeah, because it's such a big thing, and I kept having this feeling that I needed like 2 months to tackle the next draft. And then I was like, why? Because I always used to write in between things, like when I was in school, when I was at university, when I was teaching, I always did it in snippets. So now I agreed with 3 other people who wanted to be like on my cheerleading squad. I send them a chapter every Sunday.
Having that accountability definitely helps. I think that's why having a writing group in person ideally, but so often now we can have writing groups online too. So you have that accountability to each other is so helpful.
Well, that's why I have my accountability group on Facebook, the Accountable Wordsmiths.
Yes.
And I always wanted that to be like sort of an organic thing. And then I realized this year as well that I needed to be more proactive in that. So I started doing more goal setting, and that's really paying off. And I also realized I never set my own goal. So it was always almost as if I created that group for other people, as if I do not need help with that myself. So I actually immersed myself into it, and now I'm actually doing that work again.
Do you find that sometimes creating that space and creating that help for other people can be a distraction for you away from your own work though as well? Because that's sometimes what I've found with the creative writing classes and these sorts of things. And I'm quite good at, pulling things together to support other people. And then that's a great distraction away from my own work and away from the things that I feel quite overwhelmed by in terms of novel writing, especially. I've been very good this year at poetry writing. That was one of my New Year's resolutions, was to write every day. So I've written a poem a day.
Oh,
but that's good for keeping the creative juices ticking over. But what I've not been so good at, and this is what I'm going to try and do in February and March, is set up a habit when I do 1,000 words a day on my days off as well. So do you think that same thing about, some projects can detract from other projects?
Well, actually, with this particular part, so the accountability group, I was not involved at all.
Okay.
Right. So I really wanted that to be an organic thing. It's like, so here's your group, go ahead, go crazy. I realized that didn't work, but it also meant that I didn't get the accountability and support that I wanted. And for me, like, I'm quite used to doing things by myself. So like reaching out for support is something that I struggle with. Also, as somebody who has published so many books in the past year, as a writing coach, as an editor, as everything, like I'm a professional. I do this for a living. I often feel that I need to be the one who's got it all figured out.
Yeah.
So I think there was also the vulnerability part of like not wanting to show other people who kind of looked up to me, because they see me as a role model. That like, because everybody's like, oh, you're like, you're on a roll, you're doing this, and then, but I kept feeling, I could do more, or I could do. That's the workaholic in me, the achiever. So for me, actually becoming more involved in that group actually makes me more accountable and makes me, well, at least it makes me more focused, because like the whole productive procrastination, I'm doing things all the time, not always with a dedicated focus. So having to including myself in that, weekly, like we do yearly goal setting, monthly goal setting, and then weekly goal setting, like break it all down.
That's very good. Yeah.
So now I do that myself as well. And then of course, I used to do that in the group before this year, but I didn't come back to that.
Okay.
And now I end the month with, okay, so we have people, like I make documents in the Facebook group where everybody can write their goals down, and I come back to that. So did you actually look back? Did you actually do it? And if you got off track or did something else, that is fine. But why did you do that? Like, why did that happen? Like, reflect on that. So I started doing that myself now as well. And that at least gives me, because I've always been productive, like I always do things, but it gave me focus.
Mm-hmm.
So at least now I'm working towards a particular, on a particular pathway instead of, doing.
Do you find, it's something I find that when people finish up, we've passed January now, thank goodness. What a long month January was this year.
It took 4 months, didn't it?
Oh, I know. And now we're into February, and one of my blogs that I wrote fairly recently was about Blue Monday. It's called Blue Monday, and it's the most, apparently it's documented as the most depressing day of the year.
Yeah, it's like the third Monday of the year or something. Something like that, yeah.
Third Monday of the year. And it's usually that week when people start to struggle with their New Year's resolutions, and it's something ridiculous, like about 80% of people will have failed their New Year's resolutions, maybe 90 by that time.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to be kind on yourself. And what you were saying there, Marielle, about if you come off track for a week or for a couple of weeks, just be kind to yourself and come back to it when you can. Because don't feel that just because you failed for that one day that you can't come back to it. Because as soon as you start criticizing yourself, it saps all your energy. And a quote that we've mentioned before was, it's like living with really bad self-criticism is like driving with your handbrake on.
Yeah.
You're going to be much less successful. So just accept yourself and accept that things happen. You're not always going to be as productive as you want to be. And I think certainly as a Scot, we have this working class Presbyterian work ethic that you have to be constantly busy.
Yeah.
And be very critical on ourselves about laziness. And you feel that you're lazy, and you wanted to talk about that, didn't you?
Well, this is the thing. It's like people are always surprised about my accent because it's a bit all over the place, and it depends on who I'm talking to because I just chameleon. But my dad's Scottish. He was born in Glasgow, so I do have that. You just go.
That's definitely where you get it from.
Yes, and it's mixed with my mother because my mom is famous for saying, well, if you don't feel like it, make yourself feel like it.
Okay.
And I am much more, if you don't feel like it, let's sit with that and ask yourself why you don't feel like it. Does it not? Like, are you afraid? Is it not your path? Is it not the right time? That's more me. My mother is more forceful, like my dad. Yeah,
you need to have a bit of self-care there as well, because there's every chance that you just don't feel like it that day because you had 4 hours sleep the night before, or because so I think it's important to sit with it rather than force yourself. You'll end up making yourself ill, and you'll have anxiety and stress, and I think it's much better to think, right, for me it's hydration, making sure that you've drunk plenty of water that day. Have you exercised that week? Have you ate healthily? These things make a surprising amount of a difference. Having enough sleep. And if you really don't feel like it that much that day, maybe it's better to leave it to another day anyway and do something else. That's where productive procrastination can come in quite handy. So it's balancing that up. Sometimes it can be procrastination and it's fear, and it's worth giving it a shot. I think it's always worth sitting down and trying it. What I use in my workshops and in Wellspring is a process called Wellspring writing, or 6-minute writing, and just sit down for 6 minutes. When you feel like that, when you feel fed up and lethargic, sometimes just sitting down to the writing is the most difficult bit. So if you sit down and say, I'm just going to do it for 6 minutes, actually, once you've done that 6 minutes, sometimes that's the deciding factor. You think, no, I'm just not into it today. Or, oh, actually, that wasn't too bad at all. I'm going to keep going.
Yeah.
Or that was my warm-up. Now I can go and do my novel writing, or I'm going to do some editing. Or editing, I think, creating is a much more difficult process. It's much more, it's a wonderful process, but it can take a lot out of us as well. Editing for me, I can do when I'm tired much more effectively than I can writing, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So it's knowing what plate to spin depending on what your energy levels are that day. So it's adapting and being kind on yourself to be able to adapt.
Well, that's actually a tricky thing, because like what I always say, because that's something that I really learned from my coaching clients and also from my accountability group, is that a lot of people will say, I haven't written today because I was busy editing, or having emails back and forth with my cover designer, or I'm doing this marketing class and it's like zapping all my energy, that's taking so much time. And I keep telling them that is also writing. It's all part, like every step you take in getting your book out there and sold, marketed, like it's all part of the process. If you spend the whole day looking for the right editor, you are still working, you're building towards your author career. So it's all good. But it yeah.
But it can also be, I mean, I could fiddle with my website until the cows come home. You know, I could do that forever and edit and tweak and do that forever. And there was something, it was going to 20 books to 50K, the conference in Edinburgh, was fascinating for me, particularly when I was listening to Dakota Kraut. And he was talking about no matter how, you can do the marketing, you can do this, you can do that, but if you don't have the writing, then you can't, you don't have anything to pin all this, the rest of this effort on. And the change in thinking about, he used the word content. And as a writer, and I write poetry and I write literary work as well as genre fiction. And that did grate on me a little bit, thinking about writing this creative, artistic process as content. And I thought, but actually, pragmatically, it makes a lot of sense. If you're going to be particularly a genre writer, and if you're going to self-publish, which means writing a few books a year, then you need to have the content, you need to have the books, you need to have the poetry to then work with after that. So it's balancing it up and making sure that that's a priority, and everything else in that, whether it's the book covers and the marketing, that comes second. You have to have something, a good quality product first. Yeah,
well, this actually, because of course one of the things we keep saying in the 20 books to 50K group is, the best marketing is your next book. And I recently saw this, I don't know if you caught that, there was somebody took a screenshot of somebody slamming down on the on self-publishing. And that person was actually saying there is this group online, they call themselves 20 books to 50 something, and there they say, the best marketing is the next book. And this is what leads a lot of people to writing books really quickly. And of course, like, not all books are equal. Like, there is a reason why self-publishing does have a bit of a better reputation. There's a lot of junk out there. That is true.
I completely agree. I think there's a happy medium, and I think equally you're not going to be a successful writer, I think, unless you have writing that has been well written, well edited, and thoroughly edited as well, because then you're not going to have people coming back to read your next book if it's not been a good first book. Yeah, and of course there are people within the group who would disagree with that, because there's there is. But I do believe that for me it's also so my main goal for my life is leaving a legacy that I'm proud of. Yeah, you have to find your own happy medium with. Yes, and that's what I'm proud of. So that for different people that's different something. Some people will be more proud of having written 300 books even if they're not well edited, while others are like, I don't care if it's 3 books as long as I'm really happy with the quality of it. So that's but I was thinking, I don't know how I got there. This always happens. How do I get my way back? How do we get here? Well, we're talking about 20. Well, we were talking about 20 books. You were talking about 20 books. It's the balancing, because of course if you don't put enough attention towards writing the book, Yeah.
like in a proper way,
Yeah.
then you can know all you need to know about marketing. The
Yeah.
same if you just, and this is of course, this goes for indie writers, not necessarily for traditionally published writers. If you have a stack of books
Yes.
and you don't know anything about marketing,
Yeah.
you have to be really lucky to get any books, because even the best books, they will sort of, wither away on Amazon if you
Absolutely.
don't do anything towards
Yeah.
marketing.
And traditionally published writers, I think, could still learn an awful lot from the 20 Books guys and from other self-publishers, because so much now in traditional publishing, you have to market yourself as
Yes,
well.
absolutely. Yeah.
And publishers don't have the same fallback in terms of their finances to spend on marketing. And it's a much more competitive field now than it used to be. So
Yeah.
we can all learn something about marketing books. But again, it's about finding out, about getting into the habits that you can fit a little bit of each and every day, which is very difficult for the sprinters among us, or you can call them sprinters as cats and long distance runners as being dogs, or drippers and chunkers, or however you want to call it. So it's about getting into routines, and I prefer to think of it as a routine rather than a discipline, because a discipline makes it sound quite a bit less pleasant, but a routine makes it sound like it's a bit of flow to it. So what things have you found really helpful for getting into routine yourself?
Well, what I've done, because like I said, like I kept calling myself, I've been calling myself a recovering workaholic for quite some time, and I realized recently that I can get rid of the recovering part, because it's so easy for me to slip back into that, and especially, for example, recently, there's so many things I can do better with my own business, right? So my nonfiction business, which is my coaching, my editing, my nonfiction books. There's so many things I can do better, like newsletter, for example. So what I don't want to do is I want to read all the books on newsletters, and then I want to get into it, like dive deep, and then just fix it, right?
Okay.
I also recently did the Amazon Ad Profit Challenge on Facebook by Brian Cohen.
Okay. I saw that. How was that? Did you enjoy it?
I did enjoy it. It made me less afraid of ads. I did lose money.
Oh, okay.
But then again, apparently I still have to listen to it, but he mentions me without my name on the last episode of the Selmer Book Show.
Oh, great.
Because it's really, like, I don't know yet how to interpret my results. But I got so many impressions and so many clicks. That's how I spent so much money.
Yes.
So halfway through, I tweaked my blurbs a little bit.
Sure.
And in the end, I updated the cover of one book, because I wanted like the font to be more clear, so that they see the title. Because if they just go like, "Oh, that looks pretty," click, "Oh, that's not what I want," that's gonna cost me money, right?
Yes,
And I do. People always tell me I have gorgeous covers, and I was looking at how big it actually was, and I'm like, you can hardly read the subtitle. So I didn't want to change the cover for the paperbacks, because I think those look really lovely. But I thought for the ebooks, I can easily like enlarge the font so they can see it better. So that will be my next step. But for me, it means what I've learned is that my books sell, even though I threw a lot of money at it, and then my books sell. So at least I know if my books are visible, especially some of my tarot books, they go like crazy.
Brilliant. Great. Good.
So that's something. So instead of going, first I was thinking I can only make money if I spend a lot of money, and then I realized like no, it's just about being visible and then learning to do it right. So my head went, I need to learn marketing as soon as possible. So this is me, it's January, right? So I'm like, I need to.
So you're going for it, and you're going, and did other, so that's not a habit though, so did other things fall by the wayside?
Yeah, so that's my point. What I started doing, because I realized I caught myself going, I want to do this for my newsletter, and I was going to do a new reader magnet, and I was going to I need to figure out marketing, and maybe it's time to go wide. And I'm also translating my books into some languages, and then there is this other book I want to write, because I have a massive like creativity ever since I moved to Cyprus. Like my creativity is non-stop.
That's brilliant.
Yeah. So what I started doing, I now have a really big marketing schedule. on my closet, which is like, when do I write my blogs? When do I do my newsletter? When do I do that?
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, what I do is I'm going to do something else. That's my thing. It's like, oh, I have some time. Instead of doing self-care, I'll just read another book on whatever.
Yeah.
So I made another list next to it, and that's that I give myself focus points. So for me, the focus of January was finish that Read and Magnet, and I also wanted to go from MailChimp to MailerLite.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
So
brave.
that
I've
wasn't
not been there yet, but yeah.
And I've never created a landing page or whatever, right? So for me, it was like, that's the focus of January. So in February, I want to finish reading Tammy Lebrecht's Newsletter Ninja.
Yes. Yeah, I've got that as well. That's waiting to be read.
So in March is my company birthday. I always do a big giveaway.
Oh,
So
brilliant.
nothing else then. April, I want to look into Patreon, whatever you pronounce that. So what I started doing is, when I have this going at me, I'm like, no, you can't do it. So I give myself themes per month. I can look into that then. So I enrolled into Felicia Beasley's ad course.
Great. Yeah. I was so well impressed with Felicia.
So, but I'm not going to do it now. Like, everything in me wants to do it now, but I tell myself, no, maybe May, because I have all these other things. So that is what I've been trying to do recently, because I can be very
and realizing yourself that you can't do everything all at once, so you're being very disciplined,
not without getting burned out.
Well,
like, I sometimes feel like a candle who has like 6 ends, and I'm burning, I'm burning them all, like one of those Hanukkah candles, right? You have like 7 candles. I just burn them all. That's how I feel often, and I don't want to do that anymore.
And you have constantly sort of, it's all in your mind thinking, I have to do this, I have to do that, I have to this and that. I think that's where meditation has been really good for me in terms of self-care. So that, the busy mind thing doesn't bother me quite as much. So try and do a bit of meditation every day, even if it's 1 minute. Just that's enough.
You know what? Meditation is very scary. It's also difficult for me, because it is during meditation that really good ideas come up. So what I started doing this week, I meditate. It's in front of me. I meditate next to my bookcase. And they're all behind glass. So what I started doing, I have like a Post-it and a pen. So if I have an idea, I just write it down and I stick it on the glass. Instead of, because I'm already looking at my calendar.
I have to remember, and then suddenly your meditation is gone. So,
but also I will go away with that. Like, I will allow that thought, and then suddenly I'm looking at my planner. Okay, when can I work on this project? And now I find that if I just write it down, stick it on the glass, it's not going anywhere, but I don't have to deal with that right now because I have enough on my plate. So let's focus on that. Yeah,
that's true. And that's good.
So that's how I'm trying to get out of that productive procrastination, because I really do think that's I might be a master procrastinator as well, after all.
I think you are, but it sounds like you balance it up well, and it's all a process. Another thing that I found very useful, it was John Culshaw, I think, had recommended this. This is an app called, what is it called? Streaks. So this is an app that I have, you can't really see it very well.
Streaks? No, I can't. Streaks.
It's called Streaks.
I've heard of that.
It's great. Because once you get started on a streak, I have 12 things in there that I've put on there as targets. And for writing, for example, it's getting a little bit of sort of magpie mind sort of moment that I call when you get that streak of inspiration. You get that hit of inspiration, then taking it down straight away. So writing that, doing my 6 minute wellspring writing every day. Vision board as well. Some people call it a vision board. In Magpie Mind, it's called a process log. So every day, at the end of every day, I'll write in my diary how I've gotten on with my writing that day and what my to-do list is for the next day. Which is like you were talking about with the year. What's your year's target? And then break it down. So what have I done this month? What have I done this week? What can I do today? What can I do tomorrow to head towards that? So I do that in the process log, which is basically a diary entry. And I can have a rant about everything that's happened that day too. But I always touch on my writing. So that's that. And then as soon as you start, all you have to do is press it, and then you get that little hit of, yay, gold star for that day on that one. And once you start getting a streak going, I'm now up to 32 on Magpie, on the Wellspring 6-minute writing. And because I've never done that 30 times in a row. My best has probably been 10. So 30 times in a row I've done that. And because I've got that streak, I don't want to stop.
Yeah. I
don't want to ruin my streak. So that's been a really, really good incentive. So streaks has been a very good help. The other process that I recommend to people is to get into a habit is the when and then chain.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard
What's
this?
That? No, what's that?
The when and then chain. So it's about working things into your routine.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, what do you do when you wake up in the morning? When you wake up, then you...
Okay, yeah.
So
you actually want an answer?
Well, I was going to say, but for example, for myself, I try and do my 6-minute writing as soon as I wake up in the morning. So when I wake up, then I do my 6-minute writing. Or when I wake up, if my husband's still asleep, then I'll go downstairs. So when I wake up, then I'll go downstairs and I'll put on the kettle. When the kettle is boiling, then I'll set up my notebook. When I'm drinking my tea, then I'll do my 6-minute writing.
So you can really get into it. Like you can become really detailed. Instead of being, when I wake up, I do my 6-minute writing. You can, no, there's multiple steps in that. So let's sure I write down all the steps.
It's finding the process that works for you. And sometimes, my little boy who's 5, sometimes he'll wake up early in the morning. So then that goes to pot. But then I think, well, in that case, after I drop him off at nursery, so when I drop him off at nursery, then I'll go home, and instead of having breakfast, I'll have a cup of tea and do my writing then.
Okay, yeah.
It's about working in your routines and working in accepting that your routines we have to be flexible about sometimes. And we all have routines at bedtime as well. Mm-hmm. So when it turns 9 o'clock, then I go upstairs and I brush my teeth and put on my pajamas and so on. So we have our routines already. It's just writing into a part of that routine makes it a lot easier for you to work it into, for it to happen regularly for you.
So its first part is becoming actually aware of your routines, because most of those happen unconsciously.
Yeah.
And then it's
aware of your tripping points. A big tripping point for me is after I drop my little boy off at nursery, coming home and thinking, well, I'm going to go and sit and have breakfast. And then I put the TV on while I'm having breakfast. And then suddenly Netflix and Amazon Prime Video is 2 hours have gone by. So my new routine is when my little boy is having his breakfast, I'm going to have my breakfast too. After I've dropped him off, then I'm come home. I'm going to avoid the living room. I'm going to avoid the television and come straight up to my office or my study.
Yeah, that sounds like. Do you have is there an article on this, or have you written about this?
It's in. I do have a little bit about it in Wellspring, but I think I've had a few people ask about it in more detail, so I'll put a blog out about it. My website is www.figmentcreativity.com.
Okay, well, we'll put all the links in the show notes. Okay, that sounds really good, because because the thing is, it's so easy to think of a good habit, but it's like, even if it's like a little curveball, it's not going according to plan, then everything goes out the window.
Oh, completely. It's about making it as easy as possible for yourself. If it's not just for writing. If it was exercise, for example, if you say, I'm going to do my exercise first thing in the morning before I go to work, then it makes it easier for yourself to lay out your trainer. Say you're going to go for a run or a jog in the morning, then you lay out your trainers by the door, and you have your running outfit right by the side of the bed, so that as soon as you get out of bed, you just put it on and straight you can go.
And of course, like when something happens, like the alarm doesn't go off or whatever happens, or like you said, you have a little one and you wake up, you want to go for your run, they're awake, turns out they're sick, you can say, okay, so when it happens like this, when I get home from work, this is still my priority. So it also makes you aware of, like, if it's a priority, okay, where else can you put it if plan A doesn't work? What is plan B?
And the other thing is to yourself each day. So what I now try and do is, especially if I've not done the 6-minute writing, I will try to turn on a notebook, and then I can write in that little bit of pocket of time that I've created.
So the Streak app, does it also work with priorities, or are they all a priority?
I'm not sure to what extent, but you can do things with it in terms of, you can have some that you can do 5 times a week or twice a day, or and these sorts of things. There will be other apps out there that work with personal planners. That's the one that I use because it works for me.
Okay, but it sounds good, and I do remember actually, because keeping that streak. I remember at one point, I think my meditation streak was 258 days in a row.
Wow, that's really good.
And the only reason I broke it was because I meditated after 12 a.m.
Oh,
so the app didn't.
You're very strict. I would have included it.
No, but the app didn't include it.
Well, with streaks, you can. I'm not going to call it cheating. You can be a bit more flexible.
Okay, so this is the Inside Timer app, and it basically told me you lost your streak. And the funny thing is that took me, like, ever since then, like I haven't been as dedicated to meditation, and it's really funny how that works. Yeah. It's really it's really funny. Yeah, but it does work. Because you go like, okay, what the hell? Like, I lost it. And that's like, how do you get back into it again?
I think I use Insight Timer for the timings, but I would use streaks to keep. It's like my review that I do at night when I do my diary, or the process log. I do streaks at the same time, and that's when I press the little button. And you press the little button, and your phone buzzes, and it's a whole. It's nice and tactile too. So you just experiment with different things, and you find what works for you.
Oh, I definitely want to put the link in, because that sounds really interesting. That's something I really want to look into for myself as well, and I think it could be useful for a lot of other people. What I wanted to, I also wanted to ask you, like, one of the questions, what do you procrastinate about? Because for me, I realize it's my fiction writing, and it's my fiction writing that bears my name. So I have no trouble procrastinating on the romance novellas that I write under a pen name with a co-writer. That's easy for me. I think partly because there's a bit of distance. It's not my name on it. But you have the same, right? It's the fiction writing. That is a tricky part.
I think, I would agree. It can be, I don't procrastinate about poetry because, again, instant gratification monkeys. I can write a poem quite quickly, and editing a poem, you can dip in and out of it very quickly as well. And it captures that moment. Whereas writing a novel, I think it's the marathon run, and it takes a lot of work and dedication. I'm not saying that poetry writing doesn't, but it's a different type of thing. You can do that in short bursts. But I think because for novel writing, it's what I've deep down always really wanted to do as well. So there's a lot of there's a high stake there. You know, you're afraid of failing. Quite often that's a big thing for procrastination. But also you're afraid of succeeding, because if you succeed, if you get that done, then that leads to other things to do, and it can lead to a lot of change in life too. And it means you're proving all those voices wrong that have told you can't do it. So there's a lot involved in actually finishing off a big project. But the scale of the project, I think, puts a lot of people off as well. I was just talking to a friend yesterday who came to me for a bit of coaching, and I was saying, what's the easiest way to eat an elephant? Is one spoonful at a time. And I think if you stop thinking about it as a huge, big project, and just think, okay, sneak up on it, sneak up on yourself a little bit with that. Avoid the critical voices that say you can't do it, and avoid that fear just by saying, but I'm just going to sit down to it. I'm just going to sit down and I'm just going to type for 10 minutes. Or I'm only going to write 200 words today. So little bits at a time. We so often think, right, I need to have a whole afternoon to sit and do this. So I think work it into small little chunks of time. Just sneak up and don't put too much pressure on yourself. I think that's the main thing I would say that can be very helpful, is just to make sure that you're not putting too much pressure on yourself with it, and just have fun. That's what I like about the 6-minute writing. You connect back in with just the enjoyment of the process without putting too much effort and too much pressure on yourself.
And I would say the 6-minute thing is also for there's plenty of people, like I coach mostly women. I don't know about you, and for women especially, it's there's always something else that could be done. You know, the house could be cleaner, the kids could have more quality time with you. So just thinking to yourself, it's just 6 minutes. I'm allowing myself 6 minutes of self-care. You know, because for me, writing what you really, really want to write, that is self-care for me.
Absolutely.
Because it's like it's doing what your soul wants to do.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing as well, I've had a 1.5 years on a career break, and of course, you know, I was going to have 20 novels written by the end of that 1.5 years. I was going to do this and I was going to do that, and what I actually found is that procrastination, because I had my little boy now is in nursery from 8 o'clock in the morning until 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So that's a big chunk of time. And that was what I had wanted, was a big chunk of time to sit and write and write and write. But other things came up. I did a lot of voluntary work for creative writing groups and the Scottish Writers' Centre in Glasgow as well. So a lot of things ate into that time. But now that I'm back at work, and it's only a couple of days a week, but suddenly I'm a lot busier. And I actually find that being busier and working, I'm more productive, because the time that I do have to write, that's the only time I can write.
Yeah.
So, and even if it's my poetry writing, the time that I have to do that's the only time I can schedule it in that day. So I have to do it. Whereas having that big long chunk of time doesn't actually always work for a person, because you still have to be disciplined and actually do it. And think, well, I've got all afternoon, I'll sit and have my breakfast, or I'll just do this and I'll get to the meditation, or I'll get to the writing later on. So
I'll do that first. Yeah, I know exactly know what you mean. So because I do want to talk about how you see the relationship between procrastination and laziness. But before that, I want to say it's almost as if you actually don't have the time to write, the stakes are much higher. And that for me always feels like that's why you can get that focus, you can gather that focus, you can gather that energy. Because if you do have all the time in the world, you know, it doesn't really, if it doesn't happen today, I have a full day tomorrow. But if you only have 10 minutes a day and you only have 10 minutes tomorrow, suddenly those minutes seem like they count. And of course, the full chunk, like you could imagine what you can write if you actually would use that chunk.
Well, absolutely. And if you write 200 words a day, then that's 80,000 words in a year.
Yeah.
And that's with giving yourself a couple of weeks off here and there for holidays and weekends and things. So, I think I'm trying to think what we were discussing there again. So we were talking about no, my mind's gone blank now. What were we talking about, Marielle?
I'm on the laziness thing, because you know that's a topic for me.
Yes.
We were talking about, this is great, two blank minds think alike. We were
having very little time. Yeah.
The difference between having like sorry, go ahead.
I was going to talk about NaNoWriMo. I'm assuming, have you tried NaNoWriMo before?
Oh yeah, and I'm a big nano rebel. I always cheat.
Love NaNoWriMo. And what NaNoWriMo helped me realise is you can get into a habit. The first time I did NaNoWriMo, I was getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to get 2,000 words done before I went to work. And what I learned in NaNoWriMo is actually you can even half an hour a day, you can write 1,000 words in half an hour.
Yeah. And
even if it's a very rough 1,000 words, and it probably will be, there's still a lot of stuff in there you can use. And you need to have, like Dakota Kraut said, you need to have that content. You need to have that chunk of stuff to work on.
Yeah.
And
You can't
then
edit a
I
white
talk about the
page.
writing. Yeah. I talk about the writing process, writing in that way, as writing as being like sculpture. And you hack out this great big chunk of rock from a cliff. So you've got that, and then your editing process is just about chinking into that with smaller and smaller tool, and then polishing it up to find you find the shape of it, and then you polish it up after that. So everyone has different processes, and some people prefer to write more slowly and take a lot of care over every word and every sentence, and that's great. In which case, you don't need to edit quite as much. So there's the payoff either side of it. But for me, what works is if you've only got half an hour, then you can still do a lot of writing in that half an hour, surprising amount. So I think when you're thinking about being lazy, I think first of all you have to be kinder on yourself. Thinking about laziness, don't label. If you label yourself as lazy, then straight away you're putting a label on yourself, and you're less likely to be successful. What I think is a more productive, helpful thing to do is avoid that self-criticism and say, that behaviour today was quite lazy, or I was lethargic that day. Why was that? Was it because I'm afraid of writing that? In which case, let's sneak up on it a little bit. Let's just do a little bit, and let's think, why am I afraid of doing that? Is it maybe just not the project, or is it, why am I not enjoying that? I've got one novel that I wrote partially wrote when I did my Masters in Creative Writing. And I tried to get back to it again and again, and I just can't. It's just not for me. I might go back to it eventually at the right time, but I'd much rather follow. That's the other good thing about having a day job, is that I can write what I am most motivated to write as well, what I'm feeling, what I'm enjoying the most, which can be procrastination too, but it takes a lot of the pressure off, and I can write what I'm enjoying writing.
I had that with a client. She did my 3-month program.
Yeah.
So of course, like at the start of my 3-month program, there's like the worksheet. So what do you want to work on? Because I need to know, what goals do we have? But really soon we realized that what she wanted to work on was not exactly what she told me she wanted to work on. There was this other project, but that had such high stakes for her that she'd rather work on something else. And she was like, she had tons of ideas, and she had like I think literally 100 plot outlines, right? But there was this one project, and she did so much work on that, like including she had like some artist made like character drawings, so she had the faces of all her characters, right? So that was something that for some reason that was the story she wanted to tell. But she was like, let's not do it. And of course, because like the 3-month program is like 3 months. So quite soon we realized that is exactly what she needed to write. And so we took the chunk of the 3 months. So for me to guide her through all the fears that came up as she worked on this particular project, because she didn't know exactly why she was afraid of it. It was a big project. Like in the end, she thought it was only 3 novels. In the end, she realized there were 5 novels. So it became bigger and bigger. But because we were doing it together.
You can definitely understand why it would be overwhelming.
Yeah, so that, and I think most of the other projects that she had in mind were all standalones. But yeah, I did get her to focus on this particular project, and it was not. It was not, and she was one of them. I said like, maybe I'm just lazy, and I'm like, no. Like this is kind of my, like I always, like one of the phrases I use in almost every copy that I write for my own stuff, like how to get out of your own way. And I think laziness is one of the things that you get in your own way. But it's of course sometimes you need that day off. Sometimes you're just too tired, and that's totally legitimate, right? You need to fill your cup because you cannot create. But if you find yourself like binging Netflix, like if that is like the standard, right, then you have to. Why are you not motivated? Like, is it fear, or is it the wrong project? And like you said as well, like, go ahead.
Yeah, I would agree. I think mostly it is either. I think most of the time it is fear. I think most of the time it probably is procrastination because there's fear at the bottom of that. But like you're saying, sometimes it is that it's the wrong project for you. But there are plenty of things you can do to fill your cup without writing. You can write something else without writing your big project. You can write something else. You can write around it as well. So if you're struggling with a particular chapter, maybe write something else related to that chapter or something to do with that character to help solve the problem. Or read a short story if you don't want to read a whole novel. There are lots of things you can do that still work. That's not.
Well, that's exactly, because with this particular client still, one of her, the things that tripped her up was that she had an idea of the order in which she had to do it, right? So she had like these 5 novels that sort of like worked together. They all sort of fed into each other. And she had this idea in her head, like, I start with the first one and I have to finish that one. But that became such a thing. I have to first finish this before I go to this. So I remember, I think it was a 2-week period that the exercise I gave her was just write. It doesn't matter what you write. Don't write anything else, because she had this tendency to go off on other ideas, right? I said, you cannot write anything aside this project. But within the project, you're allowed to write about anything. So any of the 5 novels, just go crazy. And that really worked for her. To stop. And of course, like in the end, you have to start finishing the first one and then the next one and then that, of course. But to get over that sort of like that hurdle of why she was putting it off, it's because she had in her head, I have to do it this particular way. Well, let's just blow that up. As long as you focus on the whole project, not on anything else. You don't have to do it in a particular order.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. Series that I'm writing is a genre, and it's romance as well, and it is very much along that same sort of lines. And sometimes I'll have an idea for a chapter that's in another novel, and as long as I come back to that initial novel and continue editing and stitching things together, then at least what I've done is I've saved myself a little bit of work in that later novel in the future. So I completely agree with that. It's a really good strategy.
But I think that but I think the trick is for a lot of people. So it's the same with the productive procrastination. It's knowing where to stop yourself.
Yes.
So if I allow you to, like with this client, like this was for only 2 weeks, right? I'm like, there's no limitation. You just write, and the amount of words she wrote in that 2-week period was like crazy, right? So that was really good. Then of course we started limiting again. Okay, so now like how do we do when we focus? So you have to know, like, when do you, like, how much can you sort of like divert before you go back? So I think that's a trial and error thing, maybe. How do you feel about that?
So I think I sort of think of it, I suppose, as being a bit like water. The creative process has been a bit like water. So sometimes when you hit that block in there, then water will find its own way around it. So but then it'll eventually get back into the same channel. It'll get back to where it needs to go. But you can help direct it towards that. The important thing is just to keep it going. And I think if you continue writing, it doesn't really matter to a certain extent what you're writing within that project. I think as long as you come back to where you were heading in the first place. You don't have to. I mean, that's the other thing I think that takes a lot of pressure off. There's nothing saying that you have to finish that novel. There's nothing saying you have to finish that series. You can choose to do it or choose not to do it. We put the pressure on ourselves. And remember, I think as soon as you realise that you're choosing to do it, then that takes a lot of pressure off.
But I think that's the thing. I think for when you say that you don't have to finish it, I think a lot of people go like, oh, thank God, I don't have to finish it. But then it's but you have to choose, because you wanted this, right? So
exactly.
Choose that. And I think for a lot, it's like if you...
Why did you want to do it in the first place?
Yes, it's
Remember, you
knowing
don't have
that.
to do it.
Yeah.
But why did you want to do it in the first place? So focus back on that.
Yeah, like the why behind it. Yeah.
I think as soon as you start cracking the whip over yourself and you start saying, but I really should do this and I have to do this, suddenly I think you can become a bit stubborn about it and say, oh, but I don't want to. And you can become all tense around about it. So anything that eases yourself up a little bit about it can help as well.
But I do think that, because I want to ask you before we quit, I want to ask you about some pragmatic advice, some practical advice. And I think this alone, like once you realize that you are procrastinating about something,
Yeah.
like, would that be advice you give? Like, just sit back for a moment and ask yourself again, why did you want to do this project in the first place?
Yeah, that's definitely, I think it's connecting back in with what motivates you about that novel, about
Mm-hmm.
connecting back in, okay, it's a novel, or what was it that grabbed you about this novel or about this character? What did you want to find out? I love finding that combination between planning a novel out and pantsing it. Because I think if you get the right balance there, some people prefer to just write straight and just follow it, and that's what Stephen King does. Is he answers the what if question and then just follows and sees where it goes. That is really exciting because you find out as you go along what the story is. And then, but I need a little bit more of reassurance, because I did that once for my first NaNoWriMo novel and ended up at 110,000 words, and it's still not finished because I can't quite see where the ending is. I can't see where to cut it off.
Yeah, it's a
So
danger of pantsing.
it's finding, exactly. So it's finding that balance there too about that. But for me, it's the joy of discovering things, of the ideas coming from nowhere. I think that works for a lot of writers. It's the joy of that. Sometimes it's the joy of just the success of knowing that you've written 2,000 words that day, and that was 200 words more than you'd written the day before. So the success of that. So it's knowing what you enjoy about it, and that's why I enjoyed writing Wellspring and Magpie Mind, because it's all about the joy of writing. And so often, I mean, we're supposed to enjoy it. Maybe we're not supposed to enjoy it. Maybe it's some people enjoy the having a very serious process, and that's fine if that's what they enjoy. But it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be. We don't have to be tortured artists.
No, I think
And I
we've
think
gone a
as soon as
long
we
way
start
from
to,
that idea.
yeah, definitely. I think
Yeah.
not everyone has.
No, but the people I hang out with online and offline, we're definitely
Yeah,
like, no, it has to be fun. Like, I'm all about following your curiosity and see where it leads. Yeah.
completely. I talk about it as following your nose and following the next sparkly thing, which maybe is a touch of ADHD. Maybe, I'm not sure.
Well,
But
I like the magpie mind. Like, I'm pretty sure that's how my mind functions. Like, ooh, and but the trick is how to just write it down, stick it on the bookcase, and just focus at what you have now. And then, of course, when at some point I have this gap and I'm like, what am I going to create now? Oh, wait, I have a bunch of ideas here. Let's see what speaks to me right now. Yeah.
I think you need both. And I think that's why I enjoy having a little bit of time to do something, a sustained project, because then that ticks that box for me. I feel like I'm being productive, but also have a little bit of time there to write a poetry, or to follow those little glimmers and sparkles of ideas as well. And I think that we all have to be in that balance for ourselves and what works. And that's why it's important, I think, to coming back to habits and coming back to not being critical on yourself and being flexible around those. So that's what my advice would be.
I actually like that, because I think for a lot of people, when we think about, okay, where do we plan our writing, we see it like as one thing, right? So maybe a really good piece of advice would be, okay, so think of like, take it apart and see it as, okay, one part has to be sustainable.
Yes.
And the other part can be about sparking that intuition.
Exactly, and because if you don't have the time, then you're not going to keep your writing fresh. And if you don't enjoy writing it, then your readers aren't going to enjoy reading it.
Yeah, so maybe that's a good advice. Like, if you plan it per day, plan both in. What will sustain you? And I do that is why when I have people, like clients or people in my accountability group, go like, I didn't do any writing today. And like, so what did you do? Well, I was back and forth about my cover. How is that not writing? So that for me would be the sustainable part. Like, for me, if you can answer at the end of the day, if you can answer the question, did I do anything today to bring my author career forward, with a yes, no matter how small it was, you're golden. Right? That's sort of the idea behind how I coach, and how that's anything. It can be anything. But I like the idea that you have that sustainable part, but you also have that bit where you create space for the intuition to hit. And for me, that is doing like meditation. When I meditate, I'm bound to have all kinds. As soon as I ground myself, it's like everywhere, right? Like everything sparkles.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so it's two separate. Yeah.
It's part of the self-care. I think scheduling that time. I think maybe if you're a chunker or a sprinter, then having, I think at least on a weekly basis, having time when you can get a good chunk of words written as well. So it's about finding those spaces for each of those things and balancing those up, whether it's your spinning plates or the metaphor that you'd used as well. What was the metaphor that you used instead of spinning plates? Can't remember now.
Me neither.
But for me, it's like spinning plates. So it's about just keeping things.
Oh well, I did say burning the candle and all that. But
that was the one. Yeah.
So like I feel like I'm one of those candles with like tons of like. I don't just burn them in two ends. Like I'm really good at burning myself out. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would say for me anyway, I think definitely having on a daily basis, having that time to open up to your intuition and have a little bit of fun, keep yourself when you're writing fresh. Working in time as well on a daily or a weekly basis for things like marketing and for the industry of being a writer and being as part of a writer publisher, but also making sure you have time on a weekly or a daily basis to write and to write a sustained project. Contribute a little bit towards that. Just helps you feel that you're still going and you're keeping that going.
Because that's the thing, it all has to keep going. You have to feed the inspiration, you have to feed the content, as Dakota calls it, and you have to feed that learning moment. Like you have to learn about your ads, your blurb writing, everything else. Like you have to keep all of that going. Yeah.
And using your routines using your routine as a scaffold on which you can build all of that. So using things like the when and then chain and streaks as well. Those are the most important tools.
We're gonna put those in my quote unquote show notes because I think that can be very pragmatic ways of. I recently had somebody who's a writer who lives here on the island, lives in my village. And she started using the 1 to 5 method. Apparently that's like when you don't feel like doing something, you just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and you go. And that's been very useful for her as well. But similarly, like when people struggle with procrastination, like 99% of the time it's fear. They are fear. There's fear about, so I think the whole digging into that, what are you afraid of? And I think that is always related to your why.
I think I would agree. It can be very helpful to dig into it. I think give a certain amount of time to that and be aware of that and where the fear comes from, and then get on with it anyway.
Yeah, don't use that. Don't dig so deep that you start using that as procrastination, not to actually do the work. Yeah. So I think
exactly. In that case, sneak up on it little bits. Just say, well, I'm just going to sit down at the desk. I'm just going to open up the notebook. I'm just going to lift my pen. Yeah. Just for 6 minutes, I'm going to write. So it's sneak up on it and be sneaky on yourself.
Yeah, before those internal voices can tell you it's not a good idea or you should be doing something else. Yeah. Thank you so much for this. Like I said, I'm going to put all the links and also the links to your books underneath the video. I think this is something I'm sure we keep talking about this because I think this is something that a lot of people struggle with, and we learn new ways to tackle it and to deal with it.
Yeah.
So thank you again for being here.
Thank you very much. And of course, I love talking about it, so thank you. I hope it helps people.
Yes, and I will also, of course, put in the link because you've been on my blog before talking about your books. So for those people who are like, what are these books about? I'll also put the link up to those books, but also to the interview in which you talk a little bit more in depth about why you wrote those books and what people can get from that. So I'll put all that in. Thank you again, Laura, for being here.
Thanks,